Welcome to the Young and Pruitt podcast. This and every single episode of this podcast is brought to you by youngandpruitt.com. Go ahead and check that out. The Drive with Layla is over there. All the previous podcasts are over there. We keep adding things all the time. Try to make this intro kind of quick because our special guest today is one Joey Knuckles. And for starters, that's the coolest name. That's the coolest name ever. So we were kind of talking here before we started recording. I seen your actual name's Alfred.
That's just for the IRS.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've heard a lot about you. I know you as if a pit crew member was to ever make the Hall of Fame, you're probably going to be the guy to do that.
Well, I sure do appreciate that.
But that's the story going up and down pit road. You know, since the Hall of Fame's been going and they've been going down through all these names and stuff, you're the name that always comes out first. You and Chocolate really are the first two that.
We should ask the Reddit army to help push that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't mean this in a derogatory term, but they always say that you were like the first superstar tire changer. Like you were the guy that really, really focused on changing tires, really loved doing it, and tried to really add some speed there. I mean, because the pit stops have changed completely since then. But I mean, for starters, they said that you would like get off the school bus and go work on race cars, right?
Well, kind of how it all started was in 1971. I'm sitting on the school bus, and these three kids got on, and they had these white shirts with STP on them. I said, "Man, these things are really cool." Where'd you get those? And they said, "Well, we just moved up from Houston, Texas, and our father is going to run for Winston Cup Rookie of the Year." I said, "Man, get out of town, really?" And they said, "Yeah, we're just past where you got on the bus this afternoon. Why don't you just stay on the bus? My mom will bring you home." And from that time, I literally put a model car down and started working and swimming out of a parts washer, pulling inner liners out of tires, washing parts, repacking wheel bearings, and my life exhaled from a kid to a grown young man within the matter of months, with responsibility of being a doctor working on a race car that could hurt somebody.
What age was that, you think?
I was 9. It was 1970. It was 1971.
Wow.
Yeah. And and the model car that I was working on, I never finished it. I never looked back. It's kind of like, for my career, I really wanted to do that at a younger age. We had a dirt track called Metrolina Speedway here in Charlotte, Metrolina Fairgrounds. And Dale Earnhardt Sr. would be running. Dale's Earnhardt Jr.'s grandfather owned a team out there that Haywood Plyer would drive for and just about win every week. And if they had anything left after Friday, they would go to Concord Speedway and race on Saturday. Stick Elliott and a lot of people. And so I had been through that. And like I said, there was Walter and Katie Ballard, and they had 3 sons that we were all within a year apart. And it was a family-run deal. They didn't have any full-time employees, just a volunteer bunch, and ended up winning Rookie of the Year in 1971 in the Winston Cup Series, working out of a one-car garage cinder block building behind the mobile home.
Wow.
Get you some of that.
But it's a far departure from that nowadays, unfortunately.
Yes.
When you left them, where was your next step?
Well, we'll go through the years up there. We had it was a struggle. We built a new car. We ran with Walter as hard as we could up to like 1973, and we started. It was all about the owner points fund then. The driver deal was one deal, but a lot of the independents would lease their car out. We had Dale Earnhardt Jr. ran his second Winston Cup race with us at Charlotte. They had what they call was the Big Chance Special. And what that was, it was Hickory Motor Speedway, Concord, and Metrolina. It was by a fan vote. And Junior Johnson usually supplied a car. Harry Gant ran the very first one, and then Dale ran the second one with us, and it was $5,000. Cash money up front, and then Humpy Wheeler got us a deal with the United States Army for another $2,000. So we got $7,000 up front to run little Dale. And let me just tell you something. He bent the gas pedal and the steering wheel the first practice. We knew that we were in good shape, and we knew we needed to get our program on tune. We went and bought new springs for the car. We took the motor out after the first practice, went back home and redid the cylinder heads. We were able to purchase a new set of headers. I built a set of tailpipes for that thing that night, and we came back and we qualified really good. And about 200 miles in the race, ran over something, and it threw the dry shaft out of it. And we came in and fixed that and went out, and that kid never got lapped. The whole day, he never got lapped on the racetrack. And when you're looking at the big Hemis with Harry Hyde, Buddy Baker, and Richard Petty, and Dale Lemon and Maurice Petty, that said a lot about our little family-run deal, because we actually could afford to buy some stuff to put in our program, other than just saying, hey man, this is all we got. We got to finish. We got to get to the next week.
How old were you then when that was all going down?
Let's see. I think I was 13. 13.
Were you just like starstruck? Not
really, because we went to school and nobody really knew a whole lot about NASCAR. There wasn't stuff on TV. That you had Tom Higgins, a great editor that kind of changed our whole life, because he did a deal. The people in the garage, Leonard Wood named us the Kitty Corps. And we would practice pit stops, but we couldn't afford, the newer impacts, the newer lug nuts, the wheel studs, and, especially nitrogen that we would run. So we would practice with electric impacts, and we would practice really hard in the garage too. And so Leonard Wood came up to me and he said, Joey, look, he said, you kids are phenomenal. Y'all got a big fan base. Y'all stick together. Y'all are going to go far in the sport. And he got hurt at Darlington, and Big Daddy Walter, he was ball joint deep down in turn one, like on lap 20, trying to pass Jabe Thomas, of all people. So we're wadded up. We're on the truck, and they come down there and get me to change the front tire on the Wood Brothers car with David Pearson. Made me put a shirt on, and everything. And I went across the pit wall, and the impact literally jumped out of my hand. I wasn't ready for that much power, so I grabbed a hold of it and went out, And so Leonard says, look, you come across the front of the car like a tornado. He says, I want you, whenever you sign your autograph in the future, you put a tornado by it and you tell them I've nicknamed you the Tornado, and you're gonna go far. So, as our independent deal kind of struggled, we were looking for drivers. We had Terry Bivens that came in and drove for us that had a little bit of money, for 4 or 5 races. We had Kenny Brightbill out of Pennsylvania, big dirt modified that won Syracuse a lot of times, that drove for us sometimes. And like I said, it was all about the car owner points. And there was a gentleman from Penargil, Pennsylvania that came to us and says, look, I want to run the full schedule next year in Winston Cup Racing driving your car. His name was Ty Scott. His family owned 5 of the nicest dress factories in the world at the time. Most of their stuff went over to Germany. Now he had won Syracuse like twice, and he was one that got in the car and he wanted it sideways. And that's when we were first trying to figure out brake bias or whatever. We just ran a single master cylinder then, nothing like the dual. So I was able to run bigger calipers on the rear, than I could prior to, and it helped our team survive. It was about buying grocery. It was about pursuing the passion and love that we had, and we're at Darlington. And Walter is, he's the crew chief on the car, and he's leading us all. And we had some really misfortunes during the course of the week. We crashed our number one primary right off the bat. Somebody had left oil on the racetrack, and his first lap on the racetrack, he went in there head on. Now those cars, granted, were pretty rigged back then. They had big tubing around there, steel bumpers, just really heavy duty cars. So we went back and we got our second car. That we just had two cars, and it was our super speedway car, and we got it out there and we made like 4 or 5 laps, and then he went to qualify. And they used to have the rookie club down there at Darlington. You would show up as a rookie and you would have to go through all these tests. The rookies would get out and run, and you couldn't qualify the first day. So the second day we went out and you ain't gonna believe this, but there was oil in the corner, and he just went. I was down there, went head on in the wall. So we had lost our whole fleet of cars within 2 days, and we're fast. We were going to be like the 4th fastest overall car qualifying the next day. So Ty's daddy was down there, and there was a gentleman, an independent driver named Joe Mihalik. And Walter and him went over there and says, look, we need to rent your car. We need to put our number on here. We need to rent your car. Joe was from up there in Pennsylvania and Utah and whatever. And so we got the car in the race. There was 22 cars that didn't make the race. Ty made a really good lap, first lap he made in the car. We're pitting on the back stretch, and we're running pretty decent. We're up there to about 20th. We've made a pit stop, and with Ty's money, we were able to put new tires on the car more frequently than we had ever had. And I'll look over there, and Walter is on the ground. He's had a heart attack, and that was the end of Walter Ballard Racing at that time. And he survived. He's still with us in his late 70s, but that left Joey Knuckles really searching for what was the next step. And about that time, in the end of 1979, my mother passed away. She'd had breast cancer for a while, and I was really in distraught. I didn't have a father. We lived in a little modest trailer home park, and I went to work for Hutcherson Pagan that built and designed chassis, and would get out of school and ride my bicycle down there. And I would weld up till about 12 o'clock at night. I would take my bicycle to Food Town, which is Food Line now, in Huntersville, which is about a 5-mile drive. And I would stock the shelves with perishables during the night until about 5 o'clock. And then would sleep there and catch a school bus and go back to my house and check on everything, and then get on the school bus and go back to school with my bicycle on top of the school. And I'm sitting there, man, I got to get back to the racetrack, man. How can I get to the racetrack? But I had a job. I was doing okay. I was able to when my mom passed away, Walter Ballard and Dick Hutcherson co-signed a note for $6,300, to bury her. Give me a minute.
Absolutely.
You're okay. You're okay.
Sorry.
You're okay.
No, you're fine.
You're fine. Take you a minute. It's okay.
Yeah.
I lost my dad at a young age too. I understand completely.
Yeah. You got a Kleenex or
Yeah.
something?
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
It's covered. This is an incredible story.
Yeah.
You have an incredible story.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll go on you whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I'm good.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, let's
yeah,
go.
Yeah. So I'm sitting there and Billy Hagan has had a team with Skip Manning as a driver out of Louisiana. And Skip was, if he could drive as pretty as his wife was, they would have done a whole lot more. So Terry Labonte got put in that car, and Terry in 1979 actually finished 5th in the Southern 500. And I sat there and I put a front subsection and a rear subsection, and I hung the quarters on it. And Daryl Bryant, who was the crew chief there, and Terry came over to pick up the car, and they went and asked Dick Hutcherson and Eddie Pagan of Hutcherson Pagan if they could talk to me about coming to work for them.
Mm-hmm.
That they needed a tire changer, a gear transmission guy, and the problem is I didn't have a way to get to work, and their shop was out of an old gas station up in Thomasville. So Daryl says, "Look, we'll try to figure out how to get you there." So he hired Waddell Wilson's stepson, Gary Snipes, basically to come and pick me up, drive me there, and drive back. Well, Gary ended up driving actually the transporter, and we had 3 cars at that time that was really big for a team, and we're competing in the top 15, top 10, maybe scratch off a top 5 every week. And we went to Darlington, and we qualified 7th. And Terry says, "Look, man," he says, "David Pearson, I just can't do what he's doing." He said he's running a completely different line around. He says our cars are equal, power wise, handling wise. He says, but he says I got to sit there and watch the Silver Fox. So we sat there and run in a top 5, all day, and it came around with 2 to go, and they went into turn 1, him and Dale Earnhardt, and got wadded up, and Terry got by David Pearson driving for Hoss Ellington, and that was my first win with a race team or whatever. And the place went crazy because Terry, even at that young age, he had a big fan following from Texas. I mean, it was Texas flags all over the infield and in South Carolina. Wow. Man, that was huge. So NASCAR came out in 1981 with our chassis were just old. They weren't safe. They weren't keeping up with how old they were. And these things were starting to rust from the inside. We had a couple of drivers get really hurt because of old stuff. Mm-hmm. So NASCAR came out with, we went from a 116th inch wheelbase to 110, and from a 64.5 inch tread width to 60 plus or minus a half. Mm-hmm. But what was happening is all these new body styles, the rear glass went straight down, and we were kind of getting educated on some aero stuff back then. And, when we went to Daytona, Daytona and Talladega and Atlanta had a very narrow profile tire for speeds of, up to around 200 that their intermediate tire wouldn't be able to handle. So we got our car from Banjo Matthews 7 days before we signed in to the Daytona 500. And we never left that shop. And we had one car, and we got down to Daytona and started talking to some people that they were doing Bondo and paint in the garage. It was just that late of a deal. NASCAR said, okay, we're going to do this. They did this December the 1st of 1979. So we had went to Riverside in 81 and about won the race with Terry, but they allowed us to be able to run the old style car. The only car there that had one was Dale Earnhardt Jr. that was driving for Osterlund then, the number 2 car that they had the Wrangler deal with. And we learned so much about seeing how his car looked, then we really was able to go home and be able to apply that, because when we left Riverside, we came home and there's a chassis there. Man, we got to go. And so we ran, we sit here and we look at the fleet of cars that all these people have now, but we ran our car at Daytona, Richmond, Rockingham, sat on the pole at Atlanta, and went to Bristol before we were ever able to get another chassis from Banjo Matthews.
Nowadays.
That's how much of a strain it put on the chassis builders. It was like, there wasn't any more influence of money, but basically, we had race teams shut down because they couldn't afford to go to the new car. So we went to Atlanta and sat on the pole, finished 3rd, and we went to Bristol, and the throttle hung and crashed in practice. And we were able to fix the car, and here's another Joey's an idiot story. I said, hey man, look, I know how we're going to be able to pull this off. We got to be able to practice this thing before the race. So it was Saturday afternoon. Everybody had left, and they said, look, you can work on the car for a couple more hours. So Terry gets in that thing, and man, we run about 10 laps, making sure everything's okay. And, fortunately he didn't get hurt in the wreck. Well, Joey got fined $200 cash because I promised him we wouldn't even crank the thing up. But man, I wanted to win. So I was with Hagen Enterprise through 92. And Jake Elder had came up there and became the crew chief. And Jake was one that was hard on you. And I kind of needed that to kind of get me up to the next level. We were able to have new tires all the time. We were able to start building some new stuff. We were able to see the fruits of our labor, not worrying about what we're not going to be able to buy. Billy Hagen's business really took off. He owned a company called Stratagraph down in Lafayette, Louisiana, and that company would do exactly what the name was. It would go strat a graph down in the seabed and find oil, and he would sell what he found to the oil companies. So he wasn't in the drilling business or whatever, but he was in the Navy and really understood sonar.
Wow.
And so we're out there at Riverside, and man, Jake and Booby Harrington that was over the car that Tim Richmond drove before he went over there to Hendricks. We had all built these new cars, and And man, all they talked about the two prior races was who was going to outrun who. And oh my goodness, man, the pressure's on me because, the drivetrains, we would, just about half the cars would fall out with drivetrains, transmissions and, gears and stuff like that. We're up on 2 tires and Riverside was a really hard place to get around. So I'm down there in the lounge. It's about 10 o'clock on Thursday night, the Holiday Inn down there in Riverside, California, and it's ladies' night. And I'm just sitting there. I'm fixing to leave and go up there because we got an early day in the morning. Tim Richmond comes in, and
oh boy,
none of the girls knew who he was. But he was just that handsome.
They were going to
find out.
He was that handsome of a guy.
Yeah.
And Tim come in there, and he had 4 room keys. And he would go give one, and it had the time in his room. Well, guess who's rooming beside this? Hang on, baby. So, needless to say, I didn't get much sleep that night, and so we're at the racetrack the next day, and we've gone through the first practice, and there's no Tim Richmond. The car's sitting there, and so Booby comes over there. He said, "Joey, y'all were staying in the same place. Did you see Tim last night?" "Yep." And he said, "Well, what room's he in?" So they went and got Tim, and there's 2 of them carrying Tim in. Man, he's run hard because he thinks he showed up a day ahead of time. He didn't know that he was going to have to be in the car. So the rule was that you had to at least get the car on the track to be able to attempt qualifying. Meanwhile, Tim is sitting there pointing at Jake Elder and us. I got y'all. And we're sitting up there. We're first. Ricky Rudd's second. Bobby Allison's third. He ain't even been on a racetrack. So he burns the clutch up out of the thing, getting on the pit road. And so NASCAR says, okay, you at least got out of the garage. You're going to qualify. You're going to qualify last, okay? We're still going to let you qualify for the pole. So Tim comes over there. We had drew like 3rd, and Bobby Allison had drew like 7th. He says, look, I want y'all to go up there to turn 6, and I'm going to show y'all how to get around this place. I'm going to take your money. Well, we doubled up. And he was ready. He had flip flops on and cash. So
that's my type of guy right there.
So we qualify. And man, we're looking really good for the pole. So us and Bobby's team, we get in the van and we go down to turn 6. Well, when you cross the start finish line, you take a hard left hander and then you take a right hander and you go down to the S's, and then turn 6 is an immediate right hand turn, and then they go out of sight. Mm-hmm. So the announcer comes on and says, "And this Tim Richmond taking the green flag. Oh my goodness, he's sideways." Well, when we seen him, he was already off the racetrack in the dirt. And he ran straight through the dirt on the asphalt and everything, come down there, pulled it from 4th, 3rd, 2nd, turned right, and flipped us off. And then we see this big cloud of dust, and Jake says, "We got him. We got him." So we're walking back to the van, and Jake says, "Man, we're gonna eat good tonight." And guess what? The announcer comes over the intercom and says, "And it's a new track record, ladies and gentlemen. Tim Richmond is first lap on the racetrack." Yeah, and he actually ended up winning that race. It was actually his first Winston Cup win.
Wow.
Driving for that number 2 car. And that was a hard one to swallow. And what really made it bad is they kept having clutch failure or whatever. I think after qualifying, he only made like two laps of practice out of that. But let me tell you,
that's the Mickey Mantle gene.
Yeah,
that's what that is.
I'm just that good.
Yes,
but let me tell you something really cool about Tim Richmond is a lot of times we would leave the racetrack and we would go to these arcades. Pac-Man and do all this stuff. Well, I can't tell you how many times that Tim would go with us and have them lock the door, and whoever was in there, kids or whatever, and would say, I'm paying for everything. And you talk about eye-hand coordination. He had it. I mean, the Galactica game, it fogged the screen up. He took it so far. And, but yeah, he was, he was pretty good. And then, at the end of 1982, Jake informed me that was driving me back and forth, to Hagen's at the time. His wife was kind of starting to battle a little cancer deal, and he needed to be back in and around Charlotte. He lived at P.O. Box 500 right behind the racetrack, Harrisburg, North Carolina. And Bob Rahili and Butch Mock had a team called Ray Mock. And Warner Hodgson had come over to us and says, look, Neil Bonnet's going to drive that car next year, 1983. I'm going to sponsor it, and I'm in the, in the buying mode to buy half of Junior Johnson. And at that time, he had already bought Richmond and Nashville and was looking at buying Bristol. Wow. Warner Hodgson owned National Engineering Company out of California. He had all the highway contracts to build highways in the state of California.
Holy crap.
That's a lot of mileage and asphalt.
And he was a racer, and his wife loved the sport, and they had two young kids at the time, and they were there when the thing cranked up and were there during the duration. And so we started out the year with Neil Bonnet, and about won the Daytona 500. We ended up winning 3 races that year. Finished second 7 times and finished third in the points. And man, I was heartbroken that we weren't going to be able to carry on. But I was at Rockingham. We had Rockingham, Atlanta, and Riverside left. And the word was out in the garage that our team might fold down. And Waddell Wilson came over to me, and he says, look, Joey, I'm just going to tell you, I really want you to come and run our deal. The whole race team wants you over here. And he says, I'm gonna do something very special. He says, I know you want to build gears and transmissions, and I know you really like, going to the wind tunnel and doing. He says, but I've got all these people to do that. He says, I want you to get the very best pit crew because we're having problems here, and Cale Yarborough's driving for us, and he's losing so many spots on pit road. So that was something that it was kind of unheard of at the time. Mm-hmm. People actually practicing for pit stops because we had so few of people that it was all you could do to get to the racetrack.
Yeah.
And so during that course of the winter, we built a car, and they had just won the Daytona 500 in 1983 with Cale. That's the year that he turned upside down and crashed in qualifying and got another car out and won the race. So the pressure was really on us. And so Waddell comes out there race day morning, and he says, Joey, he says, I want you to try these new shoes out for the pit crew. I'm like, Waddell, they look really good, but they're really mushy and all this. And it was the first New Balance sneaker. And I'm like, Waddell, you sure I got to do this? So I taped them all up because you'd move your foot. And I mean, it was just...
No support.
Yeah, no support. So I go across pit wall. We have a good right side, and I come across the front of the car, and both my shoes fly across pit road and hit Waddell upside the head. I mean, it could. And he's like, what are you gonna do now? So I ended up borrowing a pair of shoes from somebody that was behind our pits there. And we won that Daytona 500. and my feet are bleeding. And
How many stops did you do that day?
we had 7 4-tire stops, and the tires were, at that time Goodyear was experimenting with a wider profile tire and a softer compound, because in the previous years with those notch back back glasses, we couldn't keep them on the ground. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, we were down there at Darlington, and they have this announcer named Ray Melton, and he would come across, and everybody would have cotton to put in their ears at like 7 o'clock in the morning. And he says, "And ladies and gentlemen, and opening up the mic on the day's activities, that's Ray Melton, and I'd like you to turn to page 74 in your souvenir program, and we're looking at Miss Molly's ham hock and collard green as she's working out the back of the gas station over here out of turn number 4 behind the Speedway Grill." So you're already on the floor, after this, and he goes on and on and on. And so when the cars would, come around to get the green flag, I mean, he's sitting there screaming, and I think he spent all the money that he would make on bigger speakers, because you could overhear him. You could overhear him over the crowd. So it'd be like this. He says, "And now, ladies and gentlemen, as the field progresses into turn number 3, with every color of the rainbow, every manufactured out of Detroit, and everybody in the world is ready for this, and they throw the green and they sail down into turn number 1. And it's bouncing Buddy Baker. He gets the lead, but here comes David Pearson making a bid, and Richard Petty makes it 3 wide. Trouble, 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 turn 3. Holy mackerel, we can't see the cause for the Bondo dust." So, ladies and gentlemen, now that we're under red flag conditions and they've got the fires out and it looks like the drivers are okay, you might want to go down to your nearest concession stand and get you one of them ice cold Falstaff beers. But if you drink more than one of them, be sure and shotgun a goody powder with it, because you won't be cognizant for the rest of the activities, and we want to keep you safe going home.
That's great. That's great.
I'm not so sure that you wouldn't be like the greatest announcer of all time.
Oh man, I did a deal. I did a deal back in the '80s, and Barney Hall. When we'd fall out of a race, Winston would give you these little headsets or whatever, and you'd listen, and they carried the race pretty good. But I always said that I'd like to replace Barney Hall, because like on a Friday night with Jake Elder and Bud Moore and Barney and some of the crew chiefs, they would always try to get together and have a card game. And I just really enjoyed Barney kind of keeping them calm, because there's just a lot of pressure on those guys. And I mean, they'd be gambling for $1 or this, that, and the other thing, but the card games would be up to about 2 o'clock in the morning, and everybody leave hugging one another, and then show up in the garage the next morning, wouldn't even talk to one another. I'm like, come on, man.
Game day. So when you started to put this pit crew together for this car, like, was it just guys in the shop that were like able, or did you actually like go recruit anybody, or what did you do?
Yes and no. I had some really good young talent, and but my position that I was really needing was kind of hurting. I really needed a jack man. And I'd gone to school with Larry Hefner, and he had played for the Green Bay Packers. And we're down at Rockingham, and I'm like, Larry, you ever thought about jacking a car? Nah, whatever. So he says, yeah, I'll help you out today.
Wait, what year is this?
This is 85.
We had professional athletes on the pit road in 1985.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Wow.
And let me tell you how professional this guy was. So we have like a three or four pump jack.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, you know, I'm over there and I'm sitting there burning my hands, you know, trying to get the wheel off. And so he says, look, he says, after this first pit stop, I'm going to go to plan B. So we come in under caution. We're changing right side tires, and I'm following him around the car, and he throws the jack over pit wall. And this is when we could take the lug nuts off the left side. So I just kneeled down thinking that somebody was going to hand him another jack. Guess what? The car went straight up in the air. He pushed it up over the driver's roll bar, and we beat 7 cars off of pit road on the very first pit stop. And NASCAR come down and told Waddell, says, you got to use a jack. You can't bring Hercules in here and, you know, and make everybody else look bad. So, yeah, my life was going pretty good. And, you know, back when I was 18, I kind of missed this, but, there was a gentleman that, you know, that you know real good, Trent Owens, his father. Mm-hmm. Trent's father was working for the Petties, was related to Richard's wife, Linda, and Kyle. And the 43 car was overheating, and we had a tank there that had water in it, and you never would put air into it until if you needed it. Well, he put some air in it, and it exploded, and it cost his life. Mm-hmm. And they actually parked. Buddy Baker was driving for him in the 11 car. They actually parked those cars, and they stopped the race. And they had STP came out with an award for young mechanics, and I was able to win that. And when I was in high school, it's like when Tom Higgins did that deal on the Ballards, I really, really kind of got noticed, and I was kind of an outcast because I wasn't playing in sports other than a little bit of football. And Richard Petty showed up with a race car, and we had a pep rally just for our team. And Richard Petty told him, he says, look, let me tell you about these kids. He says, they got a good chance to win the pit crew race at Rockingham. And we had been practicing, and we were pretty good. Now, the average age is 14. Oh, gosh. The average age on this deal. So, but I ended up winning that award, and they gave me $5,000 from STP. And a Joy's an Idiot story, I turned around and gave it to the high school for new helmets, because we were using, the varsity would use it, and then the JV would use it, and they were just old, wore out stuff. So, but yeah, I had $4 or $5 in my pocket. But Richard Petty came up there and did that deal. So the school, the racetrack at Rockingham, LG DeWitt, let everybody in from our high school to watch the Unical pit crew race. And we're ready. I mean, we've got cheerleaders behind our pit. I mean, dude, you talk about pressure. So Walter, they have the cars in turn 4, and they take off and they go around the racetrack and they come down pit road. Well, Bill French Jr. comes up and he says, and gets out there and stops Walter before he ever even gets in the pits. Goes over there and he shuts a race car out, and he tells Walter, he says, look, these kids got to be over 16 years old and have a license. And we did not get to participate in the pit crew race. And that was one of the most disheartening deals that because what we would do is we would get there, and some racetracks, they would let us in the garage, but a lot of times Walter would go on the racetrack and go out in the infield, and we'd work on it because they wouldn't allow us in. Now, when we would go to Nashville Fairgrounds and we pitted on that little quarter mile, we could pit. You know, they really would turn their heads because they knew that was all that we had. And a lot of times we had a pack. We had Cuckoo Marlin with Sterling, and we had David Cisco and Walter Ballard. We always stayed in the same places or whatever. We'd work on each other's cars, and we would pit each other's cars. And whoever was ahead of whose would pit first. Mm-hmm. And swap tires out, you know, do what we had. We were kind of like the independent brigade, and you know, Elmo Langley was kind of the chairman of that. We were just constantly fighting to try to get more money for the back end of the field. Because I mean, we went to Talladega one time and started 60 cars. We were lapping cars on lap 12, and they had a 23 car pileup, and that's the race that Wendell Scott lost his life. But we got up to 1986, and we got Cale, we got Ford, and we're figuring the Fords out, because basically Ford came in there and offered us so much money. They basically bought us out because they had won 2 Daytona 500s in a row. And so Waddell Wilson comes up to us, and we're on the pole for the Firecracker 400 in 1986. And we go out to dinner, and Mr. Ranier's standing there, the car owner, and Waddell stands up, and he says, I've just accepted a position to start a new team for Mr. Hendrick with Tide and Chevrolet and Darrell Waltrip as their driver. I threw up. I mean, literally, I was like, I was not ready for that. So, you know, because we were really good. I mean, I worked there, and there wasn't nothing that we couldn't build. You know, we had machinists from Holman Moody. You know, Waddell surrounded himself by thinkers and people that could make stuff from Holman Moody when it was a Ford Icon and had over 200 employees. Mm-hmm. Factory-backed Ford racing. We had that with the Chevrolet and the Ford. And, I mean, they were making their own camshafts, I mean, their own pistons. I mean, you go back there, and, I mean, they're making lifters, you know, and they were trying to make valve springs. I mean, they were just, man, they were eat up racers. They did not want to pull something out of a box that was made somewhere else. So Mr. Ranier came to me, and he said, Joey, he says, I really don't know what I want to do here. He said, I've been racing, I think it was about 8 or 9 years then. And he said, that just really hurt me that, you know, Waddell was my first employee and Cale was doing good. They went from running all the races to try to win a championship to where they'd run Cale with a limited schedule. And so I said, well, I got this little kid over there about to eat me out of house and home. He's fishing off my back. That his name's Davey Allison. And I said, I'll stay if we can give him a shot next year. We got to run Cale 4 more races. But Waddell and everybody but Luter, Vernon Hubbard, and myself stayed. And I was bound and determined to outrun them the next year. Mm-hmm. And I built built a brand new car for the Southern 500. Cale won that thing a lot of times. And I can't get Cale on the phone. I talked to his wife, and we're sitting at the racetrack. And she says, Joey, he's out here on the tractor. You're going to have to drive over here. Well, his driveway's a half-mile long. You get out there. And so I get up with Cale, and he says, look, I'm going to do you one of the best favors you've ever had. He says, I ain't showing up, and I want Davey to test that car. And I'll drive it in the race, but I want Davey to do the 2 days of testing. He says, I got that much confidence in him. He said, Joey, you got to understand, I've been driving for 30 years. I'm kind of wanting to wilder my way out of it. He had 62 Hardys at the time, and this, that, and the other thing. And he's his kids were where they really needed him, and he was set car dealerships. And so I come back, and Robert's like, well, where's Cale? And I said, he ain't coming. He said, well, I got 3 motors here I really need to run or whatever. And he says, well, what are we going to do? I said, we're going to put Davey in it. And Davey got in there and ran 2 days for us. And the time that Davey set on the 2 qualifying runs were a new track record. And that was paramount because they didn't have a jet dryer out there. And every time the car would go by, you'd see the sand flying up. Mm-hmm. in there. The racetrack was really slick. I mean, I didn't make any adjustments on it. Just to get Robert his engine test and everything, and we came back and we qualified 8th with Cale, and Cale tried to talk Mr. Rainier into letting Davey start the race, and so Harry come to me and Davey, and he said, Joey, he says, I want you to be my crew chief, and I want to hire Davey, and he said, all I have right now is a contract with Ford for 15 races, and that's all I got. And he says, how are we going to be able to keep Robert here? I said, well, it's, Robert's a racer. Robert's watched Davey grow up and has won the championship with Bobby Allison. I said, Harry, the thing that we got to look at here is we're going to kind of be a 2-car team because I got Bobby Allison to lean on. I got Bobby Allison that can get in this car. I got Bobby Allison that will go out and run with us and come and talk to us. And he's going to want the best for his son. And I said it's going to put us up there. So we went through, the Ford deal where Robert was, experimenting and stuff, which we were R&D team those last 4 races with Cale. And we finished 5th at Atlanta with Cale, and I come home and took that car and put a new 97 nose on it, cut the quarter panels, and I just wanted to go down to Talladega just to break the ice. And we went down there on that Tuesday after we had run Cale with Davey. And the truck driver, Davey, myself, and Robert went down there just by ourselves. And I said, Davey, this thing's probably going to rub the quarter panels a little bit. Just go out there and just feel this thing out a little bit. We got a lot we want to do here. So we go out and we make 2 laps. And I wanted to run a 10-lap run. He says, yeah, everything's fine. And the lady from the rescue squad ran up there. And we're on top of the truck. And she's got a phone, a bag phone. And it's Bill French Jr. And he says, y'all come home right now. You just ran 216 miles an hour. Come home. Well, I had my stopwatch, and I mean, it was like 48:12, and I'm like, man, something's wrong with my watch. And we didn't have, the NASCAR timing or anything, but they had somebody up in in the tower there to start finish line up in the press box that was individually, clocking. So we came home and I built a really narrow car for the Daytona 500. And it had just about slept with that thing, had been to the wind tunnel, and we didn't show up for the Ford manufacturer test in Daytona because I did not want people looking at my stuff. And we really didn't need to spend the money because we didn't have a sponsor. We'd been searching, and there was a gentleman, Elvin Wright, that walked into our shop from Texaco a week before we were supposed to leave to go to the Daytona 500. And our car was sitting there painted white with the Carolina Blue 28, like what Fred Lorenzen had drove at Holman Moody, because Robert had built the motors for that. He says, we're going to go down there. We'll be okay. And I mean, we're washing the rags at our home. We don't have a uniform service. We're just doing everything that we can. And so they come in there, and the guy says, I just talked to Harry Ranier. We're going to sponsor y'all for 16 races this year. Me and Robert looked at one another, and I mean, we were out of gas. I mean, we were just, because Robert, he never quit running the motors, and I'm back there working on lightweight gear transmission components, lighter dry shafts, straightening up the pinion angle. We didn't have chassis dynos. We had a engine dynamometer, and it just had straight tailpipes that went out the side of our shop. Mm-hmm. And there was our shop was actually built on a mill property, and Harry Ranier bought the property, had the mill tore down, and went and built him a home up in Kentucky had the good solid brick. And we were racing out of the warehouse there beside it. And so we Carolyn, Robert's wife, come over there. We were trying to figure out, they brought us a Haviland oil can in there. And Carolyn come over there, and Carolyn designed the car that we ran in 87 in 5 minutes, the paint scheme. And I'm here to tell you that lady had a knack for interior design, and she had a knack for colors. So we painted that thing and put the Haviland on it, and they had uniforms made overnight. And we leave. We got to be at the racetrack at 6 o'clock, and we left at 10:30. We're in the van, and Robert's driving the truck, the tractor and trailer. So he kind of liked doing that, I mean, he wanted to do it all, Mm-hmm. So we pulled, and we all agreed on Waffle House in Savannah. That's where we were going to pit. So I'm driving the van, and I follow the truck in there. We get parked, and Robert says, that ain't a good sign. And there was a Texaco right beside the Waffle House, and the T had burned out, and it said Exco. Well, Robert went and called Harry Ranier right then. He had a bad feeling in a payphone. And Harry said, look, you can't unload that car with the Texaco stuff on it. Shell has just sued Texaco, and they froze everything. Our deal might not be done. So we hadn't made a press announcement or anything. We were going to do that when we got to the racetrack. So we got down there, and we had to, that was a tearjerker, pulling the stickers off of the car. We just had the 28 with the paint scheme. So we went down to Daytona, and we qualified second, outside pole with Bill. And, we're really happy. And Waddell and Darrell come up to us and says, look, is there any way that y'all can lag back in our qualifying race? We gotta finish higher than 14th. We have, there's no provisionals. We got to get in this thing. They blew up qualifying. They didn't have a legitimate time that would get them up there. So they took, so many on speed and then 14 in the race. So I said, Davey, look, we're good. Let's get back here and help them because it'll help us later on in the deal. And both Davey and Bobby went back and they pulled Darrell up, and Darrell finished 13th. So Waddell told me the other day on the phone, he says, he said, I was hurt so bad, Joey, that you wouldn't come with us. But I was your biggest fan, when you was over there in 87. And we went to Rockingham and sat on the pole, and then Texaco got everything cleared up. And we went to Atlanta with Texaco and finished 5th. And by year's end, we had won 2 races, finished in the top 5 12 times out of 19 races, and sat on 5 poles with a rookie crew chief and a rookie driver. And then things kind of went south with me right then, because I just couldn't get my grasp around how everything had happened so quick, and I wanted some, I wanted to make the deal stronger. And Oldsmobile had come to me about being the crew chief for Buddy Baker. And I said, man, I can't leave my family here. And I talked to Davey pretty hard about it. He says, look, Joey, he says, Robert's going to end up purchasing this team from Harry. You go what you can do, what you need to do for about a year. He says, we can still talk, we can still help one another or whatever. But he said, you go absorb all the information from Oldsmobile and come back, and I think it'll make us stronger. So I left Rainier Racing, and they had a signed contract with a gentleman named Herb Nabb that was a good friend of mine, and he had told me that he was going to retire. Well, that didn't happen, and it kind of left me jobless, So Davey had a really good friend down in Glencoe, Alabama named Mickey Gibbs. He'd been tearing the short track circuit up and whatever. And he says, look, just go down there and help him. They want to run, Daytona and get a cup car and run some stuff. And, he says, but Buddy's still going to get you over there. So I did that. I went and built a car, and, man, we went to Daytona and won the ARCA race. And we were running. I took that car and put all brand new sides on it in the infield, right out of Victory Lane. Went from Champaign to Azizwil in 30 minutes, and put sides on that thing, and painted it with black primer. And we were running 7th with 2 to go, and blew up and missed the race. And we went to Rockingham and did pretty good. We went to Atlanta and did pretty good. And then Oldsmobile come over there and says, look, we got to have you. We're not where we need to be with this deal. But Buddy's sitting there, and all we hear is Joey Knuckles, Joey Knuckles, Joey Knuckles. So I went from, living in Glencoe, working out of a, pretty nice shop down there. And I told Mickey and them I would help them. I got David F. to go crew chief the deal and worked really hard with them. And my first race was at Martinsville, and I won mechanic of the race from TRW. We led to 4 laps to go, and then buy one, get one free Hoosiers come apart on me. And
not a Hoosier fan, I can tell.
Well, I mean, that was a tough situation. Is you went to the racetrack, and each, when you showed up, you had to get 2 or 3 sets of Hoosiers and 2 or 3 sets of Goodyears to find out. You basically wasted your whole first practice figuring out what tire was faster.
Wow. You couldn't just kind of wait and just see what everyone else was doing, or was it that big of a difference with the drivers?
Well, it was a tire war. Mm-hmm. And, like when we were in Daytona, Goodyear came out with a narrower tire than what NASCAR put a spec on. When they started that tire war, Goodyear came out and had devices that measured the tires, and like we went to Pocono, Goodyear got thrown out. We went to Daytona, they got thrown out, and the same thing happened to Hoosier. So it was like, man,
Thrown out.
yeah,
Goodyear got thrown out.
yeah,
Wow.
could not race in the Daytona 500. Every team when they came out with the radio, Bill Elliott crashed down at Daytona, and NASCAR got looking, and they says, no, Hoosier is going to be on every car here for safety aspects, and their tire was narrow. And then when we went to Pocono, Hoosier's tire was too wide, so everybody ended up. So it was not a good thing. It was tough. It was tough on the driver, and it was really tough on the car owners, because Goodyear, Bobby helped us get a tire deal for Davey where we were guaranteed 12 brand new tires if we would do tire testing for him with Bobby, during the course of the year. And the cool part about tire testing is, man, I loved it, is you could make some money. They would pay you $200 a day as a crewman at a tire test, and they would pay the car owner so much per mile and a driver so much per mile. So everybody wanted to do a tire test, man. That was the thing, So, and then you would be, you'd be up on, when you went back and whatever.
So not only was it a free test for your car, like you were getting paid.
You were getting paid. I mean, I would make more doing a tire test during the week than I would make on my paycheck.
And would they have any influence on the setup of the car, or you just went with what the tires needed?
Well, you would show up and they would let you make 4 runs. So you were able to make sure you're not dragging the racetrack or whatever. And then your headset went to the Goodyear engineers and they talked. And they would come in and you would just be standing there. You wouldn't know anything what was going on. It was strictly their test. And they would put tires on there that they had their secret codes and whatever. And they would have a sensor on the right rear and right front that would show the temperature of the tire. So you wouldn't get into a situation. They said, this is when we're in trouble, come in. Mm-hmm. And about that time we were, the racetracks were kind of getting old and wore out, and they were putting new form of materials on the asphalt. And then, we went to Dover and it was concrete, and we were like, man, what are we going to do with this thing? I mean, everybody's out there spinning out and crashing, and and in that time we were trying to figure out power steering, and we're trying to, a lot of teams were beating themselves because they were trying too hard. So we got up, I was a crew chief for Buddy Baker, and we're at Charlotte, and we're on the restart. The run is 7th, and the tire comes apart in 3rd gear in the middle of 1 and 2. And Buddy gets hurt really bad. I mean, we didn't really know how bad it was, because he just really hit a lot of pain. But it was, what had happened is he had a bad concussion and his brain kept swelling. So we went to Michigan and run good, and we went to Dover. And we're running in the top 10, and he just comes down pit road with his hand out the window. And he says, look, my head's hurting so bad, please give me something for pain. Please give me something for pain. And so we had some goody powders and gave him some water, and he's off and running. We finished, 20 laps down or whatever. So I started talking to Jerry Punch. He was kind of like our doctor at the racetrack, along with Mr. Petty, that was my doctor. He was at Charlotte. He was at Atlanta. He's still, he's still doing really good. A big back surgeon or whatever. But he took care of a lot of us coming up, and so we get to Watkins Glen, and Buddy's like, I mean, his eyes aren't looking good. He's shaking. I'm like, Buddy, Morgan Shepherd's standing over here without a ride. Can I please put him in just for this practice? And he says, no. So Buddy went and got in the car, and I go get up on top of the truck, and instead of turning right, he turns left, so going backwards around the racetrack. So I run down there, and NASCAR's already aware, and they're got the lights on. Well, he can't see the caution lights because he's going backwards or whatever. So he comes down, and he, that's before they had the dog leg in the back there where JD got killed, and he spun out back there. And so I got a hold of Jerry Punch, and they helicoptered Buddy Baker out of there, and they drilled a hole in his head in the helicopter to save Buddy's life. And so I got Morgan, and we finished 7th in the race. But my whole, here I am. I got this deal with Oldsmobile, and Buddy's doing good, and then he's not. And so I went through Morgan. We went to Michigan and fought for the lead. I mean, all day long, and ended up finishing 2nd. And Morgan tells me when the race is over that he's got a full-time ride. And so, there's no drivers walking around. And I was still doing gears and transmissions at home. And I called Rick Mast. I said, Rick, will you drive my car? Will you please drive my car at Bristol and Darlington? I said, I got a brand new one for Darlington. And he says, man, yeah. He says, I'd be happy to. So we go to Bristol and finish like 5th. I mean, in the oldest car I had. I mean, I took I said, well, I know he's just but I mean, and he got out of the car, and he looked better than I did. Like, well, I know this kid. I know this kid from Virginia's tough now. And so we get down to Darlington, and I mean, it's just like when Davey was, down there for the test. Rick is really fast, but we can't. He's got to go through the Darlington, rookie tryout deal, and we can't qualify until the next day. And we go out and set a new track record on the second day of qualifying, and we start. I think we started 21st, and ran pretty good. And Greg Sachs showed up with some money. Oldsmobile had been talking to him, and Greg showed up, and I said, man, I got Rick over here. I don't know what day Buddy's going to be able to come back. It's like juggling in between 3 drivers, and we're fast. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're fast. So put Greg in the car. Greg does pretty good. And we about won the National 500 out here at Charlotte, about won Rockingham. And then we get to Phoenix, and I just missed the setup terrible. It was the first race that we were out there. And I was trying to run the big sway bar in the rear. I was just, car owner points, we were up there pretty good, but I wanted to try to get something ready for next year. And I ran so bad there that that Buddy decided to do something for the next year, which Oldsmobile pulled out, and that's where I was getting my paycheck from anyway. So Harry Ranier comes over to me in Atlanta. I'm just like, man, what's my next deal? And Harry says, look, he says, my coal business has really took a turn for the worse, Joy. And he said, I know your heart's over there with the 28 and your best friend and Robert and all. He says, I'm trying to work out a deal with Robert to be able to purchase the deal. And he says, I'm not going to beat him up on the price. I'm basically going to sell him the corporation for what's owed on it. And that was just parts. It was just parts and things like that. So I went back to the 28 car as the crew chief, and we won. We won Bristol, we won Charlotte, But we were having a lot of mechanical failures. You know, my pit crew was good, but motor wise, you know, we were good. I mean, we had power. We could pass anytime we wanted to. So I went to Robert and I said, Robert, I think we need to look at another crew chief. And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, Larry McReynolds might be available with this Kenny Bernstein deal. Larry's really good friends with Davey. I'm really good friends with Larry. And I need to concentrate on us not falling out of races. And where I can get back to practicing, you know, with my pit crew. I want to be able to roll the car out, you know, for Larry with his input, but and Larry won't be worried about me stabbing him in the back because I tried to help him get the job. Mm-hmm. And we did that, and we became a dominant force within a couple of races. You know, all the communication was there. Everybody was on the same page, you know, which we had, you know, a amount of knowledge, but I just wasn't that guy. You know, I was the guy before they came in with gas shocks, and with not being able to go to college and anything like that, it just, you know, it just really hurt me. And there was nobody to really train you on that. Mm-hmm. You know, Penske had a trailer at the racetrack and everything was kind of hush hush or whatever before we were even able to get a shock dyno. We weren't able to build our shocks or whatever. So, I mean, if the guy was a Davey Allison fan, you got the best stuff. Or if he was, you know, so, you know, we went to, you know, we did pretty good. We were winning races, and we got to 1992. And, you know, we were running good, or we were wrecking. Running good or wrecking. And when I say wreck, I'm talking about helicoptering Davey out of the racetrack. And so, you know, we got to Charlotte. We won to Winston, and that really hurt him, you know, when he wrecked there. We wrecked at Bristol real hard. And Pocono, I don't know how he survived that because he's flipping down the backstretch, and the guardrail just cut the whole body off of it, sawed half the roll cage, throwed the motor out of it.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good highlight.
Yeah. And
that always gets showed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Robert's freaking out. I run down there to the infield care center, and the guy says, hey, Joey, he's going to be okay. He's going to be okay. And I'm like, what? So I go in there, and his eyes have already swole shut. I'm like, oh my goodness. So we go get in the deal, and we all go over there to the hospital, and Bobby's there. Bobby, his daddy flew over there in the ambulance. I mean, in the helicopter with him. His guys, he's okay, but you don't want to see him. So, oh yeah, we want to go see him. And I mean, his head was real big, and this, that, and the other thing. And he hears us, and he can't see us. He says, I want y'all to go home and get my Talladega car ready. Don't be in here worrying about me. You know, and we're like, oh man, okay. So we get down there, and Bobby Hillin Jr. didn't have a ride, so we put Bobby Hillin in it, practiced and qualified. And I don't know how he was able to get out of the hospital, but he showed up Saturday afternoon, and we had a show car outside the racetrack that he got in, and he had this stuff that when he put his hand on the shifter, it would stay on the shifter to where he could shift the gears. So NASCAR comes over and he says, look, you know, Davey has to make a lap in this car this afternoon. So Davey comes over there, and we get him in the car. And, I mean, he's got his eyes taped open. And he gets out there, and they said, Davey, just run around the apron or racetrack and come back in. Well, the first time he come around, he's in the middle of pack running wide open, flipping Wally Dallenbach off. I'm like, you go get you some. So they red flagged it, and we came in. So we promised NASCAR that within 10 laps that we would come in and get him out of that car. And, you know, everybody was worried about it, but, you know, there again, Bill France Jr., he ran a stiff ship. and we really miss him. And he would come, and when he said something, he'd turn around and walk off. There wasn't no
No question.
Yeah.
Or anything.
there wasn't none of that.
That was law.
So we're sitting there, and we started in the back on purpose. And you ain't gonna believe what happened. When the cars come around, the second turn started throwing stuff on the racetrack. The Alabama gang, and there ain't a cloud in the sky, and it's raining. And we get a caution and get him out of that car. And, that season, it just kept going and going and going. And then, we were kind of out of the hunt, and we won Phoenix, and we went to Atlanta leading the points. There were 5 cars that had a chance to win the championship at the last race in Atlanta.
Wow.
We got involved in a little incident that kind of caved the left front end and the skirt a little bit. So we came in and worked on that, and we were in a position 5 points to be able to pull it off. And Ernie Irvin spun out, and Rusty Wallace was in front of us, and Rusty got through and we didn't. And that cost us the championship. But, also, that year, I mean, we went through, with Davey being hurt, like I said, we'd win or wreck. And, I mean, when we went to Charlotte for the World 600, we didn't have a backup car. And Junior Johnson and Tim Brewer bought us one of Bill Elliott's cars down there, and we went to the next 3 races with a number 11 Budweiser Ford Thunderbird in our truck as a backup.
Dang.
Now that's what you call working together. Robert Yates used to work for Junior, build all the motors that Kel won those 3 championships with, and Junior really thought of Robert, as a really good family member, him and Carolyn. And, we get up there right before we went to, the second Michigan race, and we lost Clifford. He was lost at qualifying, spun around and hit the wall, and something happened to the seat, and he had an open face helmet, and he hit the rear view mirror, and he lost his life there. And that was, you can't imagine the trials and tributes that Davey was going through.
Yeah.
For that deal. Davey was still hurt, and we had a nationwide program that he run out of Hueytown. I had a lot of components in that, and a lot of hard work and stuff in that deal, but it was something that Davey wanted to do. We wanted to keep Red Farmer in a job and his cousins and keep something going, and that kind of helped us out where he's running with the same tire compound package and everything that Goodyear's throwing at us on Saturday that will help us out on Sunday. But that deal with Clifford, man, that was we went and buried Clifford, but the 1992 season we left out of there, and we says, okay, we're gonna be real strong in '93, and we came out, we won Richmond right off the bat. We did good in the Daytona 500, and we're leading the points race, and he lost his life in a helicopter at Talladega. And the thing that I really understand is it wasn't pilot error. It wasn't a helicopter error. I had talked to him that morning because he says, look, I want to go to Charlotte and shake this new Busch car down. He says, we need a 370 gear. I said, yeah, okay, I'll put one together. We'll find. Just have the boys swing by and pick it up. And we had just run the very first Loudon race. And him and I had roomed together up there. And it was our first experience with lobsters, and we couldn't get enough. We ended up eating lobsters till like 10 o'clock at night, right down Macquarie's, right down from the racetrack.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in there, man, and Bobby Allison and Richard Petty's over there signing autographs all night. And we get up there, and it's so hot, and I was pretty exhausted because it was a heavy braking racetrack, to begin with. It had so much grip, you could just really get down there and get after it. And, after every run, I was having to put new calipers, new pads, new discs, bleed the brake fluid out, along with pulling the gear out and checking this out. So after about the third pit stop, man, I'm kind of getting dizzy. So they ended up giving me an IV right there before the last pit stop, because I thought we were leading, and I says, okay, I'm going down. So they started putting the IV in, and the caution come out. So I went over there, and I cost us the race. We ended up finishing third. We came in leading, but we were 3 seconds off, and then they hauled me away. And but Davey called to check on me. He said, "Man, hey, I love you. Don't worry about that. We got plenty of races to win." He said, "Joey, I fell behind the wheel a lot of times on you." And that's the last I heard from him. We got a call from Daytona. It was Bill French Jr. He wanted to talk to Robert because the racetrack had called him and said Davey had a crash. Well, Davey had told me that him and Red Farmer were going to fly over there to helicopter, and Neil Bonnet's son was going to test an ARCA car for the very first time. It was just then. And they had just paved behind the media center, and they'd put a real tight fence in there, and Davey could have landed anywhere, but he chose to land behind that thing with the new pavement. And Red Farmer said, Joey, he says, we got down there and Davey had throttled down and we actually touched the ground, and then the helicopter went up a little bit and the propeller came in there and got him. Red was fortunate. He just broke his leg, and then so, as a family race team, we all got together and we said, man, what are we going to do? And I sat there and I says, we just need to take care of everything with Davey and worrying about racing after Pocono. I don't think we need to go. I don't think anybody here is emotionally, and so we gave up all them car owner points or whatever. And a little old whippersnapper named Robbie Gordon was doing a really good job in A.J. Foyt's IndyCar that year. They were off that weekend. And he had done some testing with Jenny Dunleavy, so we put him in the car just for Talladega. And Robbie did a really good job because he didn't really know Davey, and he knew that we were down, and he kept us laughing. He kept us off of us because, man, everywhere you looked, was Davey Allison stuff, Texaco Havoline stuff, and people crying and stuff like that. And we got through there, and we got Lake Speed to run a couple of races for us, and Ernie Irvin stepped in there, and he says, look, guys, he says, I know I ain't the crowd favorite. He said, but I got a big foot, and I'll listen to what y'all got to say. He says, I've got a contract, with Chevrolet and Morgan McClure and Kodak. And he says, I'm your guy. I am your guy. And so Robert called Dale Earnhardt and says, Dale, what do you think about Ernie? And Dale says, well, if you remember the first Winston Cup race he ever started, I sponsored it, him and Mark Reno over here at Charlotte, and they finished 8th. He said, he's he's the perfect guy to where y'all can keep him under control. Where he's at now, they're just scared of him, and he's tearing up a lot of stuff and making a lot of people mad. And we were able to get Ernie, and we did some magical things. Winning races, and man, we get up to Michigan, leading the points with Ernie, and we go out just on a morning practice, scuff tires, no big deal. We've took our qualifying motor out, put our race motor in, gonna go run about 20 laps and pull it out, put another motor in, and evaluate our situation. That's what we did. We always, first thing we did was unload the engine hoist. I mean, we were packed. We didn't have a lounge up in the front. We had ammunition. We weren't worried about.
That's what I would expect from a Robert Yates team.
Yeah, man, we're
everywhere.
Yeah, I said this on another interview last week. I said I was very fortunate to have worked for Waddell Wilson and Robert Yates for 20 years, and it was like stepping back in time and working for Holman Moody. The passion, being a car guy, was so much there. We had an engine shop with a race team as a hobby, and every breath you took was for that Daytona 500. And out of those 20 years, I've got 7 Daytona 500 winning rings. And that's getting her done there. That's
Yeah.
getting her done with some really good drivers and really good situations. And Ernie got hurt at Michigan, and that kind of put us back down again. And we got Kenny Wallace that finished the year out for us, and he did a really good job with little experience. And the doctor said that Ernie wasn't going to be able to drive for the first part of the year after. And Dale Jarrett, after winning the Daytona 500, come over and told Larry and Robert and myself, he says, I'm game. I don't have a contract. I'm happy. I'm okay, but I just really like y'all's family-run organization. We're where you are right now. Mm-hmm. And so Dale came over. We only won one race, but we were fighting a situation. It's like the Fords were so dominant. The Chevrolets and the Pontiacs, Oldsmobile had already pulled out, but they were able to run 2 more inches of rear spoiler and a wider one than the Fords were. And you seen Bobby Labonte. Man, he was up there, winning races and doing, really good at that time. We won Pocono on gas mileage. So Ernie was able to drive. We ran him at Wilkesboro, Phoenix, and Atlanta, and he just about won those 3 races with Todd Parrott as the crew chief. And Ford came in and says, look, we really like Dale Jarrett. We want to put a package together here to where you can start another team. And Robert told him right up front, he says, my feeling on that is there's only room for 1 car in victory lane. Point blank, I'm not interested. And, Ford was just, and here's the loving individual that Robert is. Robert didn't want to see Dale out because he did everything that we asked him for. Mm-hmm. We were kind of at a disadvantage because we were loose in everywhere we went, and all the Fords were. Well, they were equal in the playing field out kind of as the year got on. So Robert takes on the deal with Ford Quality Care and Ford Credit, and we had had Todd Parrott in there that had already been, working with Ernie a little bit, knowing our strategies and everything. And then Larry left and went and became the crew chief for Dale Earnhardt at Richard Childress. So We got Mark Reno to be the crew chief for Ernie, which they grew up. They came out here together in a Winnebago, and it was good. You had Todd and DJ that were doing good. And, you know, we won the Daytona 500, the Brickyard Southern 500 with the 88, and we won Michigan with Ernie. And Ford come to Robert and says, look, we feel kind of bad that we took the sponsorship away from Bud Moore. Bud's down there struggling, just about to shut down. He hadn't been running in a little while. So Robert came to me and he said, look, Joy, he said, that would be a perfect opportunity for you to go still be in our family, help Bud out, and be a deal for driver development. So I went down there to Bud, and I met with all the Ford crew chiefs and their engineers, and I said, look, I'm your test guy. You give me a car, I'm going to run it. I want to run somebody's motor, a different race. I want to run everybody's stuff, you know. And so Tim Steele was supposed to be the driver. He had been winning all the ARCA races or whatever. And so we went to Indianapolis, and the very first lap on the racetrack, it spit a rod out of number 3 bank and blew the right rear tire off. And I remember looking up and seeing the door number in the turn number 1 and him wadded all up in the fence. I'm like, oh, man, I'm so tired of being in hospitals and, you know, all this. I mean, it's like Linus with the towel. The dust keeps following me. Mm-hmm. So I run down to the Edenfield Care Center, and I can't find him. I said, where's Tim? Well, we ain't seen him. So I got my headset halfway on, and Bud says, hey, Joey, get down here. Tim's climbing in the other car. I'm like, what? Well, Mike Helton come down there and says, look, Joey, I don't know. He says, so they took him back, and, you know, he came back about an hour, and they said, hey, he's good to go. So we ran about 400 miles that afternoon, and got back to the motel, and I'm over there with all my notes and this, that, and the other thing. I want to change some spindles and, you know, some anti-dive and all, you know, I got a plan. And Tim said, Joey, I'm a little sore. I'm gonna try to get through this deal. And I didn't really pay no attention because he was in a hot tub sauna and the bubbles were going up. So the next day I'm at the racetrack, and his daddy comes out and he says, Joey, he says, you might need to find somebody else to drive this thing. He says, Tim's got 4 broke ribs and a broke ankle. After he gave me 400 miles. Wow. Trying to, you know, and, you know, it wasn't nothing of his doing, you know, just, you know, spit a rod out of it, blowed the tire out and crashed and hit the wall. So we're back, and, you know, we can't do anything. You know, we don't have a driver. You know, he's on the mend, and he had just got married, and his wife didn't want him to drive anymore because he'd had a couple bad crashes before that. So Jack Roush calls me. He says, Joey, I need a favor. I said, please. I said, I've got to have a driver. He said, well, I just fired Ted Musgrave. He's on the way to see you. And he says, whatever I can do, Joy, to help you. It was just a situation where the sponsor just the whole deal just wasn't working. Well, Ted was sitting there leading Darlington, and Dale Jarrett come up and passed him, and he didn't rough him up, and Dale won the race, and Ted finished second, and that didn't go over good. You know, just you know, the racing gods wasn't shining on him. So I got a driver that was mad, that had just bought a new house and had been fired. and man, we went to Michigan and did good, and I built a new car, and we went to Darlington, and Bobby Labonte had been down there, and he was in there with a chance to win the Winston Million, and Bobby was down there. And I come down there and my car's taped together. You know, it ain't painted or whatever. It looks like, you know, something out of Animal House put it together, you know. But she's a brand new. And we went out there and Ted, I'm here to tell you, I mean, he's like David Pearson, man. He run a different groove around that racetrack and was fast. And we went out and I said, Ted, just go shake this thing down. Well, he shook it down till it ran out of gas. And Jimmy Makar was the crew chief, and Bobby come over there and said, Joey, my God. He said, man, we've been down here. We've been through 18 sets of tires. Y'all come down here with one, and your first lap's faster than anything that we've run, and you're a second quicker after a 50-lap run. We can't even run 50 laps. And so I said, guys, let's just go home. I can't tear this thing up. So we loaded up and came back and put a nice paint job on it, and Ted spun out qualifying. We were fastest in practice, and he spun out, didn't hit nothing. So, you know, we made the race, and we got up to like 7th or 8th, fighting with Jeff Burton there. You know, the pace has slowed down about another, 4 seconds, from new tires. But Ted, I mean, you look at Ted's up at the top of the racetrack in turn 4, chops it down. I mean, he's running the kid could get around Darlington. I mean, man. And we accumulated so much tire rubber that it actually knocked one of the spark plug wires off. So Goodyear, the tire wear was so bad, and it was unlimited tires back then, that the minute somebody would have a problem, everybody try to go up and get their tires. Well, my car come around, and Ted says, I'm on 7 cylinders. It ain't blowing up. I'm on 7 cylinders. Well, the caution come out. And we came in, found the problem, put the plug wire on, sent Ted out, and I turned around. I got no tires. The race teams had come up and basically took our tires up. My tire guy's laying on the ground with a black eye where somebody done hit him, and they're gone. So I had to park my car because my tires were gone, and Goodyear had none to mount. Bud standing up there, it's like, Joey, well, it just wasn't meant to be. And so Ted, with not having a full-time sponsor or whatever, Ted wanted to run up front. And he said, Joey, let me go over and run this truck series. I think I can win the championship over there, and I need to be in something every week. So Bud Moore got bought out by a family called the Finleys. They were out of San Francisco. And they allowed me to build 3 cars, and they signed Derek Cope as a sponsor. And they said, they thought they had Harris Casinos as a sponsor. We sent a car all painted up out there, and we went out there and we got to Daytona, and that didn't happen. And we finished third in the qualifying race and was running 6th with 5 to go and blew up. I get home, and I got my Rockingham car that just needs to be loaded up on the truck. And the Finleys come over and says, look, Joy, I know you don't want to hear this. You've worked hard all winter, but we're not going to Rockingham. And man, that just took the life out of us. And then, the layoffs came, and, Derek was kind of disgruntled. He was trying to find something else because they had him under contract. So I said, man, I'm running Talladega. If I got to drive it myself, I'm running Talladega. And I painted the car white and blue, like when Bobby Allison drove for Bud. And Derek Copes comes down there, and he says, Joey, I'm not driving the car. I'm like, Derek, please. He says, they owe me money. And I said, okay. So I called Ted. Ted come and got in the car. We run top 10 all day. They getting the pile up, wasn't our fault. And we went to Charlotte and blew up qualifying, and that was the end of my crew chief career and everything. It was the end of what we call Bud Moore. That was the last race with that. And so I just wanted it bad. I wanted it bad. Jobs were, kind of tough, especially since I'd, been off the beaten path down there in Spartanburg for 3 years. So I got a call from Ford wanting me to oversee their NASCAR parts program. It was an existing company called Race Parts Distribution, RDI. And I took a hold of that deal, and we were selling roof flaps. I became the biggest distributor for PFC brakes, Willwood Engineering, and the owners, they kind of didn't see eye to eye on some things, and lo and behold, the company's making a lot of money, and they ended up shutting it down. So this is in 2007. So I became Performance Friction Brakes' biggest distributor in NASCAR, from starting an account from scratch. And the owner, Don Burgoon, and Derek Dong, the director of motorsports, out of Clover, South Carolina, which I'd been good friends with for a long time. I went down there and I worked for them until, 4 years ago. And the ride to Clover, South Carolina just got to be too much, and all the traveling and everything. And when I went to work at RDI, I just got married to a beautiful lady, Tammy, out of Buffalo, and we had a son, Ayrton Jacob Knuckles, and then we've got a 9-year-old little girl, Amelia May Knuckles. And so man, well, I'm still building gears and transmissions. I think I can just kind of sit here and hang on, and but I got a call from Bill Seifert, who used to own half of BSR with Butch Stevens, and they sold that company and did very well. So I work over there for them 3 days a week. I get to go into all the NASCAR shops, carrying parts, and I'm 56 and I'm still racing, and pretty content. But I've always wanted to be a pit reporter, whether it be on TV or radio, because I still know what's happening, and I think I can put it in a layman's term to where the fans could kind of understand it, and wouldn't make none of the mechanics mad or this thing. I signed 14 autographs last week from pit crew guys when I went to Martinsville. I'm walking behind the pits, and these kids come up, and I was that kid. I was that kid that couldn't go across pit wall, that wanted to so bad. And I won several awards for, tire changing, gear transmission, crew chief, or whatever, but I lived for 2 days out of the year. The first one, of course, was the Daytona 500, and the second one was that Unocal pit crew race. And when in the 70s, we used to just change 2 tires, and we got to getting pretty good, and I begged him. I said, man, I ain't won this thing yet. I got a jack, man. Can we do 4? Where I have a little bit better chance. And I just want to be known as a racer.
I think you've accomplished that.
You've definitely accomplished
more
that.
times than not. What an incredible story.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to be a pit reporter, your storytelling ability is absolutely incredible. Not only from living it and surviving it, but I mean, I felt I was there watching the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, your ability to recall all the little details, and it's crazy. That's the one thing that everyone always says is, that you're the legendary pit crew member. That's you. So, I mean, having you on is a big thing for me, because I moved down here just to do the pit stops.
Yeah. I was fortunate that I lived in the area. Spartanburg used to be, a big racing town with Bud Moore and Cotton Owens and Mario Rossi and Earl Ross and those guys. And you had Holman Moody up here, but you had, Waddell worked for LG DeWitt way down in Ellerby, with Benny Parsons, the Wood brothers up in Stewart, the Pettys and Randleman. You know, I remember when I was 15, I drove up there and got an engine block from Richard Childress, and he was working out of a gas station. I'm up there every week, and I'm just, you know, amazed that, you know, there's one thing that our sport kind of took a turn. You know, I grew up to where the drivers stayed with you, worked on the car. Yeah, he felt your pain. I think the drivers, they just they're too expensive now, and why I say that is my shop foreman is still in NASCAR, and he's making half of what he was in 1992. That's just not, you know, and it's like when Robert says, "Hey man, you know, go do this deal down at Bud. It'll help all of us. It'll help Ford, whatever." And then he calls me and he says, "Joey," he says, "I had to replace 3 people when you left." He said, I had to pay a tire changer $80,000 that works for UPS. You know, I mean, it's just, but I mean, hey, that's just, you know, everybody in my era, we were multitaskers. You know, now, you know, you've got specialized, and I can understand that. You know, it hurts because I wish they had a decathlon to where you could go in there and show everything. You know, I'm a certified welder. You know, put motors together, wire them up, put the body on, build the gears, transmissions, do all the brake work, and drive the transporter to the track. And I've also did a whole lot of testing. I've won a lot of dirt races driving throughout my career on a Friday night. You know, if I wasn't in an arcade, man, I was at the local racetrack. Say, "Hey, man, I'll get your whole family in the cup race. Let me wheel that thing. I'll buy you a new right rear tire."
Yeah, that's a whole other episode. I know you got to get out of here, but those were great stories. I could definitely see.
Please come back.
Yeah,
please
come back. I can definitely see your love for the sport.
Yeah,
you're a very humble guy.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, even some of the crazy stories I've heard. You know, how you always used to like play jokes on everybody and try to liven up the room and stuff. So.
Oh yeah, well, let me tell you one more. We had this when the drivers started doing the full face helmets, they would fog up, and this guy came out to where he had a hose that went out there and it just brought the air in. So we're down there at Talladega, and Davey says, "Joey, how am I going to know if this thing worked?" Well, I'd ate some of his grandma's chili beans, and I backed up to the vent there, and I don't think he could have wrecked harder and got out of that car on fire as he was chasing me down pit road there. Yeah.
Worked.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's, you know, whole bunch of stories like that.
Well, I want to thank y'all guys, and it's really cool that somebody that goes over the wall, you know, cares as much for the sport as you do and are trying to reach out, you know, for the fans. I was at Martinsville, and that's how I grew up. I grew up in a contact sport. And you know, when the race was over, they used to open up the grandstands. So, I mean, if you bought an infield ticket or a grandstand seat, you know, when the cars got on pit road and got in the garage, man, you could go in there. If the garage was fenced in, you couldn't go in the garage, but you could get you a lug nut. You could feel a hot tire. You could look at a deal, and the drivers would come out or whatever. I'm a big, you know, I'm a young driver kind of guy, man. I want to see these young guys, you know, go out because, you know, they're our sport now, and I'm so happy, you know, with their attitudes and how they conduct themselves. And, you know, I can see our sport kind of in a little bit of a lull right now, but I think we're going to, you know, if we keep having racing like that, that we're going to, you know, we're going to be okay. I wish that we could, you know, build a mile dirt track and run that with the Cup guys, somewhere. And I wish that we'd be able to run a race at Rockingham. It's very, very dear to my heart. And I went to both of the truck races down there, and they sold the whole front straightaway and half the infield for a 200-mile truck race, standalone truck race on a Sunday. And it just really hurt my feelings why they couldn't keep going, because a lot of people don't know it, but Virginia is like your biggest fan base. And they can jump on 95 and they can go to Rockingham and Darlington, Mm-hmm. And it's just really convenient for them, just like you can from Charlotte or whatever. But I remember the first time I went to Riverside, and I seen my first Asian and my first Mexican. and I came back, and they said, "Joey, what'd you do this? You weren't at school yesterday. Where you been? You play hooky?" Or I said, "No, coming back from California." She said, "Well, you get up in front of the class and you tell them, what you were doing and what you've seen out there." I said, "I ate a burrito by a Mexican, and I seen chopsticks for the first time." And all the kids were like, "No." And I graduated North Mecklenburg in 1979, and we actually had tractor parking there. and I mean, when it was time to harvest, I was different, because most of the kids were third or fourth generation, one of 5 or 10, and they made a living off the land. Their families had 100 or 200 acres out there. And I remember they were paving Interstate 77, and Mr. Joe Hunt took us all out there and fed us Kentucky Fried Chicken. And he got up and he says, "Life as we know it is going to change, and I don't know that it's going to change for the best." And that's when, everybody started discovering Lake Norman, and the property got, so expensive and stuff. I mean, man, when you turned 16, you could drive a school bus, a stick shift. I mean, it was, everybody were car guys back there. It was, there's two things. If you weren't in auto mechanics, and if you didn't have a Future Farmers of America jacket on, thank goodness I look really good with a football helmet on.
All right, Joey.
Thanks again, guys, and I appreciate y'all, and I hope your show continues to go on. I know y'all are in the ground roots of this deal, but
thank you. Yeah,
but y'all got a really good deal going here.
Yeah, we're the independents.
The independent.
Yeah.
There you go.
We're the independents.
There you go.
Clawing and scratching our way through.
Yep.
There you go.
So thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was really cool. Hope everyone enjoyed listening to him. Hopefully Joey will be kind enough to come back, and there's a week full of stories there.
Right.
So we got plenty to talk about. We ain't ever going to run out of stuff to talk about. But you can follow the podcast at Young and Pruitt on Instagram and Twitter. youngandpruitt.com. You can follow me at JackmanZach on Twitter and Instagram.
On Twitter and Instagram, you can follow me at Tall Guy Turbo.
That's a wrap.
You can follow me at Verdict Ridge Country Club.
All right.
We out.
Yeah. See ya.